Let's bring in now member of the House Financial Services Committee, Republican Congressman French Hill of Arkansas. He's also a member of the GOP House Whip team for another one of the Trump administration's trade deals, the USMCA. Congressman, good to see you this morning. Full disclosure, we both went to Vanderbilt, so it's going to be very difficult for me to criticize you, but I'll do my best as a professional here. Let me just ask you on the question of China first. If the president goes through with even bigger tariffs, as he's threatening to do, right now at 10%, he says if he doesn't get what he wants from that Chinese delegation that's still planning to come to D.C. this week, he'll bump them up to 25%. What impact would that have, and what impact are the existing tariffs now already having back in Arkansas?
Right. Well, thanks for the invitation this morning. This is a serious issue, and for over 2 decades, we've tried to get the Chinese to come forward and make structural changes in their economy, not just buy more American goods, but increase market access for our companies, reduce intellectual property theft, have a more fair way to do business in China. That's what President Trump has put as his top issue in trade.
Right.
The tariffs right now, in my view, Willie, are not having a dramatic impact on American GDP, but I think in the future, if they were fully implemented on the full amount of Chinese exports to the United States, you could see some concerns about potential inflationary impact from it, and perhaps maybe as much as 0.1% impact on GDP based on the sources and analysis that I've read.
So in the short term, you believe the tariffs are working?
I think in the short term, the tariffs, which I don't agree with necessarily as a strategic tool, have been major leverage to bring the Chinese to the table. It's something that we have not tried before in the bilateral work in the Clinton or Bush administrations or Obama's administration. And so President Trump is using a big to try to get them to make more structural changes in their economy. And I think it's true that China generally, from a current account balance, from the impact on their trade, their economy, they are in a weaker position than the U.S. or the global economy given these tariffs.
So, Congressman, you are right. This is a battle that's been going on for 25 years. I remember in 95, 96, 97, we would have fiery debates about extending MFN, most favored nation trade status, to the Chinese. And the big fight was, and I always voted against it because of religious persecution, but also because they kept stealing our intellectual property. That was 24 years ago. They continue to steal our intellectual property. I understand your concerns about the tariffs, because obviously that's a tax that's laid on your people and other Americans at the end of the day. But what is America's best weapon in its economic arsenal to stop the Chinese from stealing our intellectual property 25 years later?
Right. Well, Joe, you're right. After Tiananmen Square, we thought that the Chinese leadership would move more towards the global economy, which is why they were admitted to the WTO back in 2001, and they just didn't move forward with an open WTO-compliant marketplace. They maintained and have intensified a mercantilistic approach to trade that's hurt the European Union and the United States. So I think bilateral pressure is number one, but it would be more powerful, Joe, if we had the European Union and Japan in line with us publicly pressing China for these structural changes, because together we're about 35% or so of two-way trade with China.
Well, why won't they do that?
I think that they are behind the scenes diplomatically supporting us, but they've let the United States be out in front. And as you know, and as you stated, that's how President Trump likes, being out in front, charging on this issue. This is his principal economic issue tied to his campaign and his policies. But behind the scenes, they're supporting us. But I think that's where we press and say, look, this is benefiting the EU. This is benefiting Japan. I just came back from Tokyo just a few weeks ago, and they were thanking us for our continued pressure militarily and keeping the straits open and open seas, and keeping the economic pressure up on China to change their policies.
Hi, Congressman. I spoke with former Senator Joe Donnelly of Indiana last night, and while you are right that we may not be seeing a big impact on overall GDP, certain sectors, including farming, are really hurting right now. That was his words. So how do we prevent the next evolution of this from being just some kind of a superficial concession from the Chinese. Meantime, certain sectors in the U.S. are really suffering due to these tariffs.
Boy, you're right. Our farm economy for 3 years has been suffering principally due to weather conditions. We've had too much rain at harvest time last fall. We have too wet a spring to get crops into the field now. So we've had low prices and crop quality problems for 3 years in a row now. As a former lender to agriculture in Arkansas, I know how tough it is for our farmers. And particularly for soybeans, as former Mr. Donnelly suggests, it's been tough. The soybean market was off about 7% since last fall due to the tariff talks. But look, we don't want, as you say, a superficial purchase of more goods from the Chinese just to please the United States. We need these structural changes. And so I think that in my state, farmers are very concerned about the direction of the China trade and the impact on their personal pocketbooks and ability to their crop. But they too believe this may be the best time to get the change that we need.
All right, Congressman French Hill, thank you very much for being on the show.
What do I say, Willie? Go Commodores?
Anchor down.
Anchor down,
Anchor down.
Congressman. Anchor down.
Okay, coming up. Wow. It's difficult.